Hello viewers and welcome to the session on producing speech sounds in English. Have you ever wondered, when we speak, how do we speak and what actually happens with the organs in our body? Yes, and that is the topic of today's discussion. In today's session, we are going to study the basic concepts and processes related to producing speech sounds in English. The topic of speech sounds will be dealt with over a series of 2 sessions, and this is the first part of the series of 2 sessions. Before we start with the session, let me give you an overview of the main points that we are going to discuss in this session. In this session, first we will have a brief overview of the concept of sound in general and the concept of speech sounds in specific. Then we will learn about various organs of our human body that are involved in the process of producing speech. Then we will also have a description of these individual sounds and their functions in the process of speech production. We will study the important organs that are involved, like vocal cords, lungs, tongue, roof of the mouth, different parts of the tongue, then soft palate, and etc. After that, we will closely examine the process of speech production, and here we will study some Airstream mechanisms like pulmonic Airstream mechanism, pulmonic inaggressive Airstream mechanism, pulmonic aggressive Airstream mechanism, and so on. Let us first talk about the concept of speech sounds. What is a sound in general? What is a sound? A sound can be anything. It can be any sound. For example, a sound of wind blowing, a sound of birds, a sound of somebody stepping forward, a sound of footsteps. It can be any sound. It can be a sound of harmonious music too. A sound can mean any sound that hits our ear. But a sound is not equal to a speech sound. What is a speech sound then? Not every sound that we hear is a speech sound. When we think of describing speech sounds, we are only concerned about sound units that humans encode and decode using some human language or some spoken language. Languages usually have 2 varieties, either spoken or written. Some languages have both the varieties. Languages are spoken or written also. But there are a few languages, like a few Adivasi languages, which do not have a written variety. These languages are not written at all. These people do not have a script in which they could write their speech. But there cannot be any human language except the sign languages that does not have a speech. Speech means there cannot be any human language that is without a spoken variety. The speech is primary mode of communications. You should know that. Any human language first exists in the speech form. When we learn our first language as a child, when we learn any language when we are a child, we learn the language in its oral form. We learn the language through listening and speaking, and we learn the graphology, or we learn to write in that language only after we go to school and only after we learn the graphemes or the graphology of that language. The sounds that we use to encode a message or to speak are called as speech sounds, and these are also called the minimal distinctive units of a language. These individual speech sounds do not have any meaning on their own, but these sounds, these individual speech sounds, they have enormous potential of encoding unlimited amount of information in them. Of course, they do it with the help of some language code. All the human languages have their set of speech sounds. In English, it is 44. English has 44 speech sounds. The languages that we speak, they might share a set of symbols, a set of speech sounds with other languages, like the English sound f. If we pronounce the English sound f, it is labiodentral. The lower teeth touches to the upper lip. But in Hindi, in Indian languages, Hindi and other Indian languages, we have the same sound, but it is slightly different. It is p. When we pronounce p during the production, the organs that are involved are the two lips. So, the sounds might sound similarly, but they are different. There are some sounds which are not exclusive to one language. For example, sounds like p and p. These are the two sounds which are bilabial. They are produced in the same way and they are used for the same function in both the Hindi and English language. There are 44 speech sounds in English, and of them 24 are consonants and 20 are vowels. We will study these vowels and consonants, the speech sounds which are vowels and consonants in detail in the later part of this session. Let us study the different organs of our body that are involved in speech production. These organs are set in different systems. First, there is respiratory system, then there is phonatory system, and then there is articulatory system. Of all these systems, if we look at the diagram that is shown on the slide, the articulatory system is more important, because the organs that are set in the articulatory system are the ones which produce a speech sound. Let us start from where all it begins. Let us go through a process of producing speech sounds step by step. The initiation of the sound force starts from the lungs. The lungs air which comes out of the mouth is the main force that is used while producing the speech sounds. Then this lung air, it passes through the windpipe, it passes through the glottis, it passes through the vocal cords, it passes through the mouth, but when it passes through the mouth, the organs in the mouth like tongue, roof of the mouth, lips, teeth, soft palate modify this air, and because of this modification, because of the obstruction these speech sounds create, the sounds are heard. Now, let us look at the organs individually in detail. We will also look at their function as well. The first organ is vocal cords. If we look at the diagram on the slide, there are two vocal cords that are situated in our body, and the vocal cords are situated in the larynx. They are parallelly. So, these vocal cords, they have different positions. First, they can be either held tight. When they are held tight, there is no gap between them, and they are held tight to avoid the food particle from entering to the maybe windpipe, trachea, and they are also held tight in many other situations. The second position they have, that they are held closely together. So, when they are held closely together, we get voiced speech sounds, because when the vocal cords are held together, the sounds that we produce and the speech that we produced during the production of voiced sounds, the vocal cords vibrate. If you put your fingers on the Adam's apple that we call it around your neck, you can feel the vibration when we produce the voiced speech sounds. This vibration is nothing but the vibration of the vocal cords. The third stage that we have is when vocal cords are held apart. So, when the vocal cords are held apart, there is a wide gap in the glottis. By the way, the gap which is there between the two vocal cords is called glottis. So, this glottis is wide when the vocal cords are held apart, and this is the position which is maintained during the production of voiceless speech sounds. So, there are sounds like p, m, during the production of which the vocal cords are held apart and there is no friction in the vocal cord during the production of these sounds. The next organ we have is a soft palate. A soft palate is the end of the roof of mouth. It is a very soft organ and it is a moving organ. We also call it the active articulator. Let us see why. The soft palate can be either raised or it can be lowered. Why do we raise or lower our soft palate during the production of sounds? When it is raised, we shut off the nasal passage completely, and the air that comes from the lungs, it is thrown out of the mouth completely, because there is a complete blockage for the air to enter in the nasal cavity. So, the sounds produced with such mechanism, when the air comes out of the mouth only, these sounds are called oral sounds. So, the soft palate, when it is raised, it causes the production of oral sounds. Then the next status of this soft palate is when it is lowered. So, when the soft palate is lowered, there are two possibilities. First, it can produce nasal sounds, where mouth cavity is completely blocked and the air passes through nose only. So, we have sounds like ma, na in English that are nasal. So, during the production of which the air passes through nose only. There is second possibility also when the soft palate is lowered. So, in this stage the air passes through the mouth and through the nose, and these sounds are called nasalized sounds. So, the action and the movement of soft palate gives us oral sounds, nasal sounds and nasalized sounds. The next articulator is the tongue. The tongue is very important articulator in the mouth. It is the only articulator which is constantly moving when we produce speech. It has several parts. It has a tip of tongue, a blade of tongue, front of the tongue, back of the tongue, root of the tongue. So, when we speak, the different parts of the tongue like tip, blade, back, they raise up to the roof of mouth and we hear the sound. For example, let us take an example of teeth ridge. Let us take example of alveolar sounds like t. So, during the production of t sound, the tip of the tongue touches to the teeth ridge and there is a complete closure of the air and the air is released suddenly and the sound is heard. So, here the active articulator is tongue, but a tip of the tongue is in place while the production. Let us take another example. Remember, there is one sound in English k, or g. So, during the production of these sounds, the back of the tongue touches to the soft palate. So, it is the back of the tongue which is active during the production of these two sounds. The Airstream mechanism is the mechanism of the air which is used for the speech production. There are different Airstream mechanisms that are used for speech production in various languages in the world. There are a few examples like Pulmonic Egressive Airstream mechanism, Pulmonic Inaggressive Airstream mechanism, there is Velaric Egressive Airstream mechanism, Velaric Inaggressive Airstream mechanism, there is Glottalic Egressive and Glottalic Inaggressive Airstream mechanism. However, there is one Airstream mechanism which is mostly used in almost all the languages, that is Pulmonic Egressive Airstream mechanism. In this Airstream mechanism, the air from the lungs, it comes out of the mouth, and that is it. And this air that is coming out of the mouth, the source is the lungs. That is why it is called the pulmonic airstream mechanism. And because it comes out of the mouth and not into the mouth, it is called egressive airstream mechanism. And this is the airstream mechanism that is used to produce all the speech sounds in English, and it is also used to produce all the speech sounds that we have in our Indian languages. So far in this session, we have looked at the concept of sound, and we have also looked at different organs of speech, their description and their functions during the speech production. Now, let us look at the various sub processes that are involved in the speech production and the role each organ plays in this process. So, there are three main sub processes during the production. First, by stricture we mean the manner in which the air comes out of the mouth and the manner in which the air is obstructed by the passive and active articulators. We will have a detailed discussion about these terms later in the session. Then the next sub process which is important is the place of articulation. By the place of articulation we mean that where, at what place in the mouth or in the vocal cords or back in the mouth, at what place where the two organs of speech like passive articulators and active articulators meet. So, this is called the place of articulation. There are different places of articulation like alveolar, bilabial, labiodental, dental, velar, palato-alveolar, post-alveolar, and so on. Then the third important subcategory which is important in the production of speech sound is the state of glottis. By state of glottis we mean the status of vocal cords, whether they are held together or they are wide apart. When they are wide apart we have voiceless sound, and when they are held together to frame a friction, and the sound heard is called voiced sound. In the production of speech sounds, there are two types of articulators that are important. First, it is active articulators, second, it is passive articulators. So, depending on how these active and passive articulators make the friction for the air, the category of the sound gets decided. If we take the example, suppose there is a sound t from English. So, during the production of t, the active articulator is tip of the tongue and the passive articulator is the teeth ridge. So, during the production of t, which is alveolar sound, the teeth ridge is not moving at all, but the moving part is the tip of the tongue. That is why the tip of tongue is called the active articulator and the teeth ridge is the passive articulator. The place of articulation and the manner of articulation is very important when we describe and classify the speech sounds. There are different manners of articulation, such as plosive. In the plosive, we have complete closure and sudden release. Then we have affricates. In the affricates, we have complete closure and sudden release. We have intermittent closure, where the active articulator touches the passive articulator so many times intermittently. We also have semivowels. So, during the production of semivowels, the active articulator comes close to the passive articulator and the sound is heard. There is no friction at all. There is a friction, but there is no contact between the active and passive articulator. Like that, we have nasal also. In the nasals, we have a firm contact between the active and passive articulator, but this firm contact enables the air to escape through the nose, and that is why these are called nasal sounds. The speech sounds has many categories, but there are two main categories of the speech sounds in English. There are 44 speech sounds in English, as I already said, and 24 of them are vowels and 20 of them are consonants. Out of 20 vowels, there are some pure vowels, there are some impure vowels. Out of 24 consonants, these consonants are divided into different categories based on the place of articulation, based on the manner of articulation, based on the stricture involved, based on the state of glottis. These organs are divided into different categories. Let us have a quick recap of what we have done in this session. First, we have looked at the concept of speech sounds with the help of some examples. Then, we have also looked at the processes through which these sounds are produced. We have studied the important organs like tongue, vocal cords, lungs, and so many other organs like roof of mouth and lips. Then, we have also studied the important criteria that are important, the sub-processes that are important in the classification of the speech sounds. In the next session, we will look at the classification and description of the process of speech production in detail. Thank you very much.